It's now time for Constitutionally Speaking. This is a feature that we do in partnership with our friends from the Office of the Public Defender. And this morning, once again, we're joined by Deputy Public Defender, Mr. Herbert McKenzie, a well-known attorney at law, and he has a lot of facts to share with us on this very topical issue, that of plea bargaining. Good morning and welcome, Mr. McKenzie. How have you been?
I'm fine, thank you, sir. Welcome back to Jamaica.
Thank you very much.
Your odyssey on the continent was successful.
It was indeed. And I look forward to my next visit, if you know what I mean.
I understand. That was the thing. That was your first?
It was my first time in the motherland. I went to Guinea, and I look forward to visiting other African countries sometime in the future.
Okay, that's a nice place to be.
Yes.
I've had the opportunity of going to Nigeria and to Rwanda.
Oh.
Lovely places.
Okay, wonderful. So, Mr. Mack, this morning there's a very topical issue, that of plea bargaining, because there's a very popular entertainer who goes by the name Squash. It's been in the news that he recently signed a plea deal, and it had some implications for his sentencing and so on. So we wanted this morning to get more information on what this entails, this whole matter of plea bargaining.
What plea bargaining, as the name suggests, is a bargaining with the prosecution by a defendant, an accused person or convicted person for a lighter or more lenient sentence or for more lenient condition. It happens in Jamaica too, but we are young to it. The Americans have mastered it. And I tell you something, it is no coincidence if you look back in history that whenever there is an extradition of a fugitive from Jamaica to the United States, not too long after, there's a flow of extradition requests for other persons. Mm-hmm. That comes about through quiet plea deal struck, or plea deal cut, whatever you want to put it, between the defendant and the American prosecuting authorities. They have it down to a science. They are good at it. In the American prosecution system, once they offer you a plea deal, take it from me, it's very hard to resist. And I say this based upon my past experience doing extradition cases when I was at the Office of Director of Public Prosecutions. But yes, we have it in Jamaica. And in Jamaica, it is basically authorized, apart from the law, by the prosecution. So, where a defendant wants to make a plea deal, he approaches the prosecution. On the other hand, the prosecution can also offer him or approach him or his lawyer if he's represented with an offer to negotiate for a plea deal. It is always for the defendant, the convicted or the accused person, a reduction in sentence. And some of the purpose of it is, if it's not a reduction in sentence, is simply because he might want to go to a less high security facility. Because we know in Jamaica our two primary high security facilities, Spanish Town Adult Correctional Center, St. Catherine Adult Correctional Center is the proper name.
Yes.
And the one down by 4th Street, they call it General Penitentiary.
GP.
Or 4th Street Adult Correctional Center. These high security facilities are no Bella Roses, They are no hotels, summer hotel. They are harsh conditions. So that could be a for a plea deal. Most of the time, what the prosecution wants in exchange in the deal is for the defendant to either help the prosecution in the prosecuting of the offense, or in the investigating of the offense, or in identifying a major perpetrator, or a kingpin, if you want to call it that, or a top-tier accused person.
So very often the person signing the deal is kind of expected to or required to give up some kind of information in instances?
Always. There's nothing for nothing. You have to give up something to get the benefit of the plea deal. And interesting that you said, because if the plea deal having been struck and the matter goes to court and the defendant fails to live up to that agreement, the deal can be rescinded. Oh. And he goes back to the normal defendant and take the penalty of the full burden of his case. So it's obligation on both sides. in form of a deal. And that's what I refer to as plea negotiations. In fact, the name of the law that governs in Jamaica is called the Criminal Justice Plea Negotiations and Agreements Act. We commonly call it the Plea Deal Act.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it can happen to two categories of persons. The person who is charged and awaiting trial, or the person that's detained about to be charged and to be tried, that's one category. And believe it or believe it not, a person is already convicted and serving a sentence. He can, although it's strictly not, it's part of a plea deal, but he would have already been found guilty. But he can approach the prosecution, or prosecution can approach him if he thinks, or the prosecution thinks, that he has information that can help the prosecution. And the process it can be detailed, but it's not complex. If the defendant or the person who is seeking the deal, or the person from whom the deal is to be extracted, is represented, well, the prosecution cannot talk to him. The prosecution has to talk to the lawyer.
Mm.
He is not represented, and he chooses not to get a lawyer because the court can assign him a lawyer from the legal aid system. Then and only then the prosecution or the prosecutor can approach him with the agreement. No, it's a signed document. It has to be in writing. And when you look at the document, the amount of information it contains, it's almost like a big commercial contract. Although it sits on 2 pages, but it's very detailed. It includes things like the defendant age, date of birth, last known address, offense for which is charged, the fact that he was told what the penalty of the offense will be, the fact that he was told that he has a right to go to trial. Everything you can think of is in that written document, and it must be signed by the prosecution, by the defendant himself, the accused, and if he has a lawyer, by the lawyer, and all of that in the presence of the JP who countersigns, witnessing the voluntariness and the veracity of that agreement.
And having signed, the next step then is to make that presentation to the judge, I would imagine.
Court. That's correct.
And
having signed,
does the judge have to accept every plea deal that is put in front of him or her?
The answer is no. Okay. The final decision rests with the judge.
Oh.
All the prosecution can do is get the deal in writing and present it to the court. The court can say, no, I'm not accepting that deal when it comes before him or her, because the signed deal, like I say, it's quite detailed as all the information. When the judge looks at it, the judge himself can find fault with it and say, no, I'm not accepting that deal. For example, the judge can say, look, even though I've seen this deal, I'm not satisfied that this was done voluntarily, that there was some form of inducement held out to this defendant from the plea. I'm not going to accept it. Go back to square one. But if the judge refuses it, it doesn't prevent the prosecution and the defendant, again, as the case may be, to at some subsequent time enter another deal, another plea deal, and go before a judge. In fact, I must also say too that even though the deal is there, both the prosecution and the defendant himself, that's the accused person, can withdraw from the deal just before sentencing at all. Any side can withdraw.
Oh.
Usually these deals are made before the defendant actually goes into court. Let us say this is a deal for the defendant to give strong evidence against an accused man called Tom Jones. Tom Jones is a top tier knocker, shutter, and you can't get him. He's like Teflon. If you find John Brown, who is so closely associated with Tom Jones, that John Brown knows everything about him, and you get John Brown to sign a deal, a plea deal, say, look, I'll give evidence against this man. This is what I'll tell you, A, B, C, D. When John Brown goes to court with the deal is accepted. But when he takes the witness box at the trial of gentleman, he moves from that position. Then and there, the prosecution says, okay, deal is off. We're back to square one. So there's an obligation upon the parties to honor their obligations. On the other hand, suppose as a part of the deal, the prosecution says, all right, Mr. Dealer, I'm going to accept the deal so you can get a lesser sentence if you plead guilty. But until the trial in which we want you to get evidence for us comes on, we're going to send you off on the necessary protection program to Florida. We will pay all your living expenses, provide you with a car, provide your family, etc., etc. Now, if the prosecution does not do that, then Mr. Dealer can come out and say, no, sorry, you haven't done your obligations. I'm not going to give evidence for you on your behalf. I'm not interested in the lesser sentence that we're talking about. I'll go to court like any other defendant, take my chances and take my trial.
Mm-hmm.
So these are obligations which each side must honor for the deals to be a deal.
Would you say that there are risks though involved in plea bargaining, and can the accused person end up worse off?
The accused person can end up worse off. Let me give you one an example. Suppose an accused person makes a deal in pleading guilty to an offense. Suppose the offense carries a minimum of, say, 10 years for argument's sake, or 15 years, which quite a number of offenses these cases carry. He pleads to the offense and gets 10 years below the minimum, because the judge can go below the minimum if there's a plea deal. And it's a case in which the way is going to assist the prosecution to give evidence against another defendant. He does that, give evidence against another defendant, that defendant is found guilty. If that defendant is found guilty, that judge sentences that defendant, not being aware of the plea deal, may end up sentencing that defendant to lesser time than the man who pleaded. So he would have ended up losing, as it were, even though it's a plea deal.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. His
redress to that is he would have to do the other category of deal which I mentioned earlier on, the post-sentence, one in which he's serving a sentence. He seeks his sentence to be reviewed on the basis that, look, I was given a deal that if I plead guilty and assist the prosecution in convicting this other man, I would have gotten a lesser sentence. Well, I did that, stayed true to my obligations. The man was convicted. The man ended up getting lesser sentence than I did. In addition to that, another outer court advantage that you give a sentence, people can hunt you down and shoot you. Mm-hmm. People can hunt you down and kill you. You people who thought that you shouldn't have, as we say in Jamaica, rat out.
Yes.
On the man.
Inform, yes.
But there are disadvantages and advantages to it. Now, I see the time is upon us, but just I want to make one more point before I part company with you this morning.
Yes.
Is that in the plea deals, in Jamaica, once the prosecution is making it, the prosecution is under duty to get the input of the victim of the case. If it's a murder, then of course it's the family connections of the deceased person. Any other offense, you get the victims. If the victim is under 14 years old, then the views of the parents or the guardians become important. If there are no parent or guardian, then the children's advocate must come in and represent the interests of that 14-year-old or under 14-year-old. If the victim is over 14 but under 16, then his or her views personally must be sought, or if not, his parents. If not the parents, then the children's advocate.
Let me ask you one quick one before you go, though, Mr. McKenzie. As in the case of squash, for instance, if this deal has been struck, is it automatic that this person would have to be sent back home even after they've completed their whatever sentence they were given?
Yes, because a guilty plea, automatic that he'll be sent home. In fact, interesting enough that because having been convicted upon that guilty plea by virtue of a plea deal, the U.S. authorities can say, look, we're not going to have you waste time here in our facilities and eat our taxpayer money. We're putting you on a plane and sending you back right now. So they can't do that. Mm-hmm. Most time they have to let the person serve the sentence and then deport them, remove them from the jurisdiction. And in that case, usually the person has no defense at all because you're a criminal convict. Mm-hmm. You serve a sentence. You breach the serious criminal laws of the country, so you're out on a plane, and usually when you come back, the police have you as a person who is to be observed, watched, and registered.
Wow, we learned a lot today. Another brilliant presentation from Mr. Herbert McKenzie. Thank you so much, Mr. Mack, for your time and the information you shared. Found it to be very interesting, and I wish you a great day. Catch you again next week, same time, for Constitutionally Speaking. All right, all the best.